Welcome back to Ion Foxborough, where we have an emergency pod for you because the Drake May era is here. Multiple sources confirmed to MassLive that Drake is going to start this weekend at Houston. Mark, what's the first reaction to Drake passing Jacoby and getting the starting gig?
Trial by fire. Listen, it's not going to be easy for the Patriots and Drake May right out of the chute. The Houston Texans have a really good defense, Chris. So my first reaction was one, I expected it because on Monday when we spoke to Drake Mayo, the way he talked about Jacoby was different. It wasn't Jacoby Brissett's my quarterback. He deflected and he was critical, right? I mean, he's been sort of critical of Jacoby over the last 2 weeks. Even, 2 weeks ago when the offensive line was bad, Gerard was saying, well, the ball's not being thrown in time, and there are some good pockets. Like, all right, sort of shots fired, and then you come out of this game, and it's Jacoby wasn't good enough, and that's a direct quote from your head coach. So the way he spoke on the radio to EI and to us, via Zoom yesterday, it had me thinking that the Patriots were clearly thinking about moving on or moving toward Drake May. My only hesitation was the Texans. They have a really, really good defense, Chris. We can dive into this more later, but like one, it's a reason to be excited for Patriots fans. Two, their offense was terrible. And three, I think the team clearly lost faith in the veteran quarterback.
I agree, and I think it doesn't like you've heard about Drake's plan the whole time, right? The plan, the plan, the plan. They never said what the plan was per se. You just assumed that it was Jacoby's going to start for a while. I think this shows you that it wasn't totally choreographed, right? It wasn't like they're going into the season saying he's going to start week 6 against the Texans, right? I think a lot was Jacoby being really bad the last two games, where I thought he was fine to start the season. He was serviceable. The last two, like starting in San Francisco, it looked like he started seeing some ghosts in the pocket, running into pressure that wasn't there. And then rewatching this Dolphins game, he was not good in this game either. There were throws that he missed, and he was still feeling pressure where it wasn't there sometimes. Of course, now it's the catch 22. That's the concern with Drake, right? If you throw him into this situation after 5 weeks, is he also going to start seeing ghosts? Like, you would hope not, but I think based on where this is in the schedule and everything, it's not terribly choreographed because if you wanted to give him a soft landing, it was last week against Miami.
Yeah, Miami was a really bad team, as we saw. The Patriots should have beat Miami. And the truth was, their offense was so bad. As we talked, they've scored what, 10 points that week, what, 3 points the week before?
Yep.
Like, I'm trying to think. The first 2 weeks of the season, Chris, how many points did the Patriots score?
They scored
Oh,
16 and then 20.
right. So they scored 36 points in the first two games.
And then they went 3, 13, 10 over the next
So
three.
36 points in the first 2 weeks, 26 points in the next 3 weeks combined. I mean, very clear, not good enough. What is surprising to me, and I'll go back to the Texans for a bit, is this is a really, really good defense. I'm going to run you down some numbers, and I'm not going to talk about the Texans just yet. I'm going to talk about the quarterbacks who have faced the Texans. Week one, Anthony Richardson, 9-19, 212 yards, two touchdowns, interception. Week two, Caleb Williams, 23 of 37, 174 yards, no passing touchdowns, two interceptions. Trevor Lawrence, 18 of 33, 169 yards, two touchdowns. Sam Darnold, 17 of 28, 181 yards, but four touchdowns. The Vikings absolutely killed the Texans. Last week, though, Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, Chris. Josh Allen, 9 of 30, 131 yards and a touchdown. The Houston Texans secondary is one of the best in the NFL right now. They are third. They have the third ranked passing defense, allowing 154 passing yards per game. That's only bettered by the New York Jets, who Drake May will see in 2 weeks, and then the Tennessee Titans, who he'll see in like a month or so. So, yeah, you're going to start against a Houston Texans team that has one of the best secondaries in the NFL. They just held Josh Allen, who might have been concussed in that game, to, some pretty poor numbers. Josh Allen, though, completed 30%. So, my only surprise in this is that he's debuting against a really tough team.
Yeah, but I guess if you keep playing it down the line, then it's like, all right, do you want him to debut in London the week after, where you're going to have a weird week again? Obviously, it's the Jags, but if you want to give him some normalcy, it is a home game here. It is. This is what
Yep.
game week is like. This is what you're going to do. And then, I mean, it is a softer landing next week, I guess, against the Jaguars. But I do think it's going to be fascinating to see what the Patriots wide receivers look like now because they made their unhappiness pretty clear early in the season, whether it's talking about being frustrated with lack of targets, going palms up when they're not getting the ball, walking off the field, the body language terrible. You're about to find out how much of that is actually Jacoby Brissett and how much of that is the entire situation. I mean, we'll see if these receivers maybe they start lighting it up with Drake May back there, but they also could get some humble pie thrown their way too.
Yeah, we're certainly going to see. because listen, we're not going to sit here and say that there was a mutiny brewing, against Gerard Mayo and the Patriots. But what we will say, as you've seen it, Chris, I've seen it in the locker room, players have been frustrated. Particularly, it's been the receivers. I mean, I think we could even go back and tell the story about what we heard in San Francisco. I mean, the Pats lose to the 49ers, and clearly the passing game wasn't clicking. After the game, you asked Pop Douglas a pretty simple question, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like what was going on with the offense or what was wrong, and he wouldn't
Yeah.
answer it.
I asked him if he could pinpoint anything specific that wasn't working with the passing game right now. And he said that's a setup question and said he wasn't answering it, where I did not think that was a setup question. I wasn't trying to set him up at all, but I think his answer is telling where he thinks that's like targeted in a certain way. It wasn't, but that was his reaction, and I think it sheds a little light on where they're at.
I mean, when he told you it was a setup question, I thought, well, either he's thinking Jacoby Brissett or he was going to blame the offensive line.
Right.
In that same locker room, though, I asked Antonio Gibson like if he felt bad for Jacoby Brissett, for how many times he was getting hit and how hard it was, and he essentially said no. He said, "Listen, it's the position, it's the position and it's tough and that's what you got to deal with." And so, like from my standpoint, like in that locker room, it just didn't seem like, although players lauded Jacoby Brissett for being tough, there seemed to be some underlying tones of frustration that maybe you could aim at the quarterback. And I think you're right. When we watch the all 22 and you see Jalen Polk stomping on the ground after a turnover or an incomplete pass, and you see Pop Douglas with his palms facing toward the sky when he was open, you say, all right, like it's very clear that they are frustrated with the quarterback situation. And I think you add this in too, like they practiced with Drake Maye. Like Chris, towards the end of training camp, Drake Maye was better than Jacoby Brissett. You saw it, I saw it. Even Gerard Mayo
Mayo said it.
admitted he admitted it. So I think from like a player standpoint, you're losing. You're not even scoring 13 points per game. You have one of the worst passing offenses in the NFL. Jacoby Brissett is, I want to say, 27th in passing, 32nd in passing touchdowns. It comes to a point where it's like, hey, like this is my job too. I want to be put in a position to win too. These are my stats. These are my life. So like, yeah, I think, yeah, it's obvious that the Pats sort of had to make this move, even though it is against a tough defense. And I'm not saying mutiny. I'm not saying there was a cue. I'm just saying, I think at the end of the day, the writing was on the wall that your best quarterback was probably on the bench.
Yeah, and I do think that his mobility could help them here with I thought the offensive line was better in the Dolphins game, especially rewatching it. And some of the issues there were even the fourth down they had at the end of the game, it wasn't the last drive, it was the one before after the Polk touchdown got waved off the board. It was fourth and long. But on that play, the Dolphins brought seven. They brought seven, and the Patriots only had six to block him. That means there's going to be a free rusher, right? If Jacoby had identified that that free rusher came right through the right side, if he identifies that pre-snap, maybe he could try and roll out and extend that because you just don't have the bodies, right? Like you're looking at that, and he's kind of just a sitting duck back there where he just backpedaled and chucked it up, and it fell incomplete. It wasn't particularly close to anyone. He was just kind of up in the end zone between like Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne. If he makes that one free rusher miss, which is easier said than done, or anticipates him coming from a certain way and can get out of the pocket, then I think you're looking at a different situation there where the play's extended. And that's one thing with Brissett that I don't think you were seeing a whole lot of is extending plays with his legs. And when he tried to get out of the pocket, a lot of times he'd run right into pressure, and it was like it just didn't look great.
There have been multiple times this year I put in sacks on him. I mean, I think one of the first ones of the game, he moved up in the pocket where he shouldn't have. The guy, Nick Leverett, was blocking, sacked him. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to put that on Nick Leverett because Jacoby Brissett literally ran into him. Like, it just not great pocket awareness. There was another play that I thought also showed some of his struggles. It was right before the Jalen Polk, overturned touchdown. So it's first and 10, Pats are on the 12-yard line. He stared at Austin Hooper the entire time when he dropped back. And he tried to tell Austin Hooper to run to the left. And, basically Austin Hooper was running up the seam, and it was a poor pass because Austin Hooper was covered. But the problem I had is that Antonio Gibson's open in the flat, like 4 yards from the line of scrimmage. And for me, it's like a really easy read. All right, the guy you want, Austin Hooper, even though he's matched up one-on-one, he's not open. But the guy to your left who just had a 25-yard run, whatever it was, 20 minutes ago, is wide open. Like, just take the easy pass because, as you've seen this year, when Antonio Gibson and Ramondre Stevenson have the ball in their hands, things are going well. And I look at that and say, yeah, I want a quarterback who's just going to take the profit. You're so close to the end zone. Get it, dump it off. Don't throw it to a covered tight end in the end zone. I thought watching him over these last 5 games, his decision making was poor.
And I
But
think it,
you
I think
know,
it got worse. Like I think it was fine early in the year. Like in Cincinnati, that was a good win for them. I thought he was good. He was competitive in the Seahawks game. And then the Jets game, I thought that was one that there was like nothing he could do. I thought that was the offensive line's worst game of the year where he was just getting destroyed. Like nobody had a chance for success back there. But the last two, I think his play really fell off. And I think that's part of the reason why they're making this move right now. And I don't, you can read that a couple different ways. Like if they have a plan for Drake, should it be at like the whims of Jacoby Brissett or should it be more choreographed? I don't know. Either way, though, I think Gerard Mayo is actively trying to win games. He sees they've lost four in a row. He does want to keep the locker room in his good graces. He's going to try something new now. And I think putting Drake in there now is much easier than like stripping AVP of play calling or any of the more like extreme paths that he could take 5 weeks into the season.
and Chris, you made a good, point when you talked about Maye's athleticism in the offensive line because as we saw in the one series he played against the Jets, is that when things break down, he can just run. I believe it was 4th and 10 where he escaped the pocket,
Yep.
ran 10-yard gain, he picked up the first down. That's not happening with Jacoby Brissett, but it will happen with Drake Maye. So it'll be fascinating to see how Alex Van Pelt sort of builds this offense around him. I think we're going to see design runs, like, for Drake Maye. And I think it could make the Patriots more dangerous in the red zone because you have a quarterback who can beat you with his legs. So if anything, Drake Maye's athleticism, I think it should help the Patriots pass protection. Of course, it'll be interesting to see if they can pass protect because that's been a problem, all this season. It's been one of the worst offensive lines, and they are now going up against one of the best defensive lines. The Houston Texans, for those wondering, has 15 sacks on the season. By my count, that's like ninth in the NFL. So top 10 pass rush, top three secondary. That's why I said, man, trial by fire for the kid.
Yeah. So do you like his chances this week? Like let's get to the game. Let's get to it.
No, I think the Patriots are going to lose. I think Drake Maye will show some promise, but at the end of the day, I don't think the Patriots can compete against a 4-1 Texans team with CJ Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. Even if they don't have Nico Collins, it's like Texans have a good team. Like really, what Nick Caserio did over there is what the Pats won, right? Like they hired D'Amico Ryans, a defensive-minded assistant coach who's over in what, San Francisco, good guy, young coach, right? He played in the NFL just like Gerard Mayo. There's some parallels there. You get Nick Caserio over from the Patriots, and they built this team, and they did a really good job drafting. Like for them, they hit on CJ Stroud, and the trajectory of their organization changed, right? You won what, 3, 4 games, 3 years in a row. The Texans were a laughingstock, Chris. Head coach after head coach. Dude, they had like more head coaches than like, I had girlfriends in college. Like ridiculous.
Humble
And that
brag.
a 4 year period. You know what I mean? Like absurd what was going on there. So like everything changed because Nick Caserio hit in his draft pick. So right now, I think the Patriots lose. I think it's okay, but Drake May has to show some promise as we get going here.
Here's what I think Drake May is going to be like this weekend. I think it's going to be like your golf game. For those who don't know, Mark is learning to golf this summer. He's gotten really into it. And so I think this is going to be one of those games where you might look at the scorecard at the end and go, oh, but there's going to be a couple shots in there that you're like, but you saw that one and you see the potential is there. And I think you're going to leave feeling good about it ultimately, just because I think there's going to be a few plays in there where you're like, see the kid's potential. And, I think it's going to look a little better than it did. The quarterback play, I think it's going to look a little better than it did last week either way. And there's just going to be enough like cause for optimism that I think you're going to feel good going into London. And then I think that's a very winnable game against the Jaguars. So my prediction for Sunday is Drake May is like Mark's golf game.
It's fair. It's fair. By the way, I golfed today, played really well, hit a 45 and 9. So, I'm getting there. So, but you know what?
There
Drake
you
can
go.
learn a
Man,
lesson
that's
from.
Drake by the end of the season right there. You've had a
That's what I'm
season under your
saying.
belt
I've
now.
I've played golf every week and I'm getting better. So Drake May is now going to start and hopefully every week he also gets better.
All right, that's our emergency pod. Thanks for listening, guys.